Hello, welcome to the show. Today we have with us John Freese and Men in Many Hats. How is it? How are you involved in the Arkamoto vision?
Well, a couple different ways, but I met Mark in 2009, actually, at our close friend's wedding. And he sat down next to me with this crazy hat that was like this amalgamation of a bunch of different fabrics, but it looked kind of like a Crocodile Dundee hat. And I sat down next to him, and he's like, hey, who are you? And I'm like, hey, I'm John. And he's like, I'm Mark. I was like, cool. He's like, I do startups. I was like, cool. I do too. And he's like, well, I'm a part of this group called Smart Ups. I'm like, cool. I'm part of a group called Starve Ups. He's like, our name's way better. Anyway, that's how I met him. So from the moment I met him, he put down something that I was passionate about and had devoted my life to. And that's when I knew we needed to be friends.
Score. And from right then, did he join Starbucks or how'd that work?
So this was a friend's wedding, and I would say about 6 months later, Mark and I talked and kept talking, and I was like, we should do a chapter down in Eugene. He's like, I'll help launch it. So yeah, Mark has been a part of Startups, the end-to-end accelerator, since 2010. He had launched Arkamoto about 2 years prior, almost 3 at that point, and was like, I'm making an electric vehicle company, and I could use all the help I can get. And it's been a blast ever since.
I like it. Yeah, you were there at the IPO, right?
Yeah. So sort of the way the story plays out that's a little unique is, so in the beginning, Mark and Joe and Jim and Sebastian and Doug, kind of the core original team of Arkamoto, had raised a series of friends and family and angel investing rounds, but had yet to bring on an institutional investor or any significant investor outside of their core. And we had a chance in 2013 to run an event. The event was with Bill Hombrecht, the world-renowned, legendary VC investor and investment banker. He had taken Adobe public, Google public, Apple public, and contacted us through a close combined friend that we both had named Thomas Thurston. Thomas had been studying disruption theory under Clayton Christensen, who wrote the book on it from the Harvard Business School. And Clayton had worked with Thomas for a number of years, and Thomas called and said, hey, here's the deal. I have never aligned with a particular venture fund, private equity firm, family office management firm, whatever, but I'm going to with Bill Hombrecht. And he said, and what he wants to do is he wants to bring $25 million to Oregon and look at 25 Series A ready startups in all sectors, all industries, and would like a chance to invest in them and maybe take them public. So I started reaching out to the various individuals in Oregon that were running organizations that supported entrepreneurship, foundership, the funds in the state, et cetera. And I called a series of companies. I wanted about half of them to be from startups and half from not. And I contacted Mark. And Mark said, I want to go first, and I want Bill to do a test drive. I was like, cool, you have 45 minutes with him. He's bringing $25 million. And all you have to do in advance is fill out this 2-page questionnaire. It's about disruption theory. People hear the term disruption a lot, but they have quantified it into 2 very specific buckets. One is that you're either the least feature-rich, least expensive solution in the market. So imagine the most recent mobile company that Ryan Reynolds has launched. The idea is that you don't need to work with a major provider. You don't have to have a long-term contract. It's $20 a month. It's all data. It's all inclusive, right? And that's considered disruption because it reaches the largest segment of the market. The second form of disruption is a product or service that has never existed before. That's a paradigm shift. And so anyway, they were studying this, and they just wanted to find the companies in Oregon that were doing one of these 2 forms of disruption. You fill out this 2-page survey, you come present. Mark goes first. Bill and Thomas and Dave, which is one of their additional colleagues, friend of ours, took a test drive of the Arkamoto and came back. Mark presented. We sat in all 25 of these presentations over 3 days. And in the end, after the presentation, Bill walked into a room with myself and Thomas and said 2 things. I would like to put just a little over $2 million into Arkamoto, and I would like to take them public. So I went and saw Mark and said, hey, this is pretty cool. What do you think? And Mark said yes, and the rest has become history. So I joined 2 years after that, in 2015, when the company was working to go public. And we can go into great detail about that if you want to, but that's the backstory on how Arkamoto went public.
Some pretty good news to bring Mark. And so that's kind of the facet that you're involved with Arkamoto, and you kind of help find investors and take it to the next level, or like how would people quantify what you do with Arkamoto?
I mean, honestly, I think the core thing I try to do with Arkamoto is just bring in all the knowledge that we've gained over the last 20 plus years, just talking to founders about startups on a day-to-day basis within this accelerator. And but my core responsibilities are brand marketing and fundraising, but I can't take credit for any of those. There's this massive team, right, that's been doing it all the whole time. But I would say what I try to bring in is every single time you hear about something that's new or different, try and present that to the team, if it's a moving target, if you will, that we see amongst our organization of founders. So there's 223 companies in startups over the last 22 years. And I've probably participated in a little over 95% of the meetings. So, and that's up to 100 meetings a year. And so just hearing every single possible story, situation, hurdle, opportunity, model, structure, right? All I'm really doing is just trying to amalgamate and share sort of the oral wisdom that comes from that. So I try to bring that to Mark and the team. And ultimately, yeah, I think people have described me as Mark's handler in regards to sort of more social situations, just because he's so impassioned. He's so driven. He's so laser focused on this life's mission of his, which I completely understand. And I'm more, I'm just okay with just talking about everything and then trying to meld the two together.
I like it. So one of those shooting targets you kind of dove into is rentals. Do I have it right that I believe it was Jesse, I'm not exactly sure who said, but that you were the person who pitched the idea of rentals first?
Yeah, so we were at the LA Auto Show. Mark, me, Fiddy, the whole crew. This is when we were 17 people, small, and we had the one prototype, Arkamoto, the first version of the Gen 8 that went from traditional automobile structure to more of a motorcycle form factor. And we were having a good time at the show, and we made some good contacts, and all of the things were going. But I just went to Mark when we were having lunch, and I said, hey, listen, if I really want to have the most success I could possibly have with this company, I should buy 100 of these and rent them on an island. And he was like, what? And I'm like, well, I've run the math. And so I had done in the background some presentations for the company and run a series of pro formas and found that no matter how you slice and dice it, with the lowest levels of occupancy or rental days, whether you're renting, a Sea-Doo or a bicycle, right? There's these standardized pro formas you can run. And even with the lowest levels of pro forma performance, and even with poor economics, you could make anywhere between, on the low end, about 6 times, and on the high end, in some of the models, 17 times the value of a vehicle if you rented it. And so I said to him, hey, listen, if you went to every lake in America and every single Sea-Doo and every single motorcraft vehicle that you saw had never been purchased by anybody, was just rented by the company that manufactured it, what do you think would happen? And the numbers are astronomically different. It also changes the entire customer experience, and it actually aligns with sort of the gig economy, which is this notion of, I don't need to own more. I need to own less. I need to experience more. And that's where rentals came in. So that was the pitch. And then since then, we've gone after the 3 core models of rentals that exist in the world today.
Which are?
Well, the acronym we've been using is Boom Boss Base. So BOOM is something I took from our colleague, Kevin DeWitt. It stands for Build, Own, Operate, and Maintain. So when a company owns their assets, like the Arkamoto FUV, and then operates them and maintains them, so it's basically a corporately owned franchise. Next is the base. The base model, the acronym basically is about building and supporting and revenue sharing with another entity. And so in this model, you give someone the vehicles, They go out and rent them and market them, help maintain them, service them, and then you split the revenues 50-50, which is pretty exciting. Imagine starting a franchise, an Arkamoto rental center, where you had no out-of-pocket costs. Maybe you have a little bit of a lease for a space, some training, right, a little bit of a build-up, but not much. And then all of a sudden you have the real assets, which are the vehicles, and then you split the revenues 50-50. You're both aligned and incentivized in a similar capacity. And the last one is the base model. So the Boom Boss base, the base is basically the one where you're a franchisee. So you pay a $25,000 to $35,000 fee up front, and then 8% of the top line, which is like a McDonald's, right, or any form of franchise, which is great. There are guys and gals out there that want to run a franchise and run it well and be very, very successful. I'm a big believer that, in today's world, the brand has to be as heavily as possible influenced and impacted by the company itself. I think it is really hard in today's world to sort of pull one over on individuals that you really care about this company or what it's doing, when it's very clear you're working to just generate a monetary return.
Yeah, because that's butts and seats. If the company doesn't have a say in what the actual user's experience is renting, it's kind of like this lost connection between that and a sale, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Fascinating. So what's your background? You kind of briefly mentioned startups. Many people might not know what that is. Do you want to give a brief background on who you are? Now we know who you are in terms of Arkamoto, but who are you kind of as a person?
Yeah, I'd say in the business sense, my entire life's purpose is to attempt to assist people in fulfilling their dreams through foundership, through building a company that will hopefully change the world. And been doing it for almost a quarter century. And this organization, Starbucks, which I know sounds a lot like Starbucks, but it was started by founders, it's run by founders, and solely for founders. And we get together between the multiple chapters 6 to 8 times a month. And it's completely confidential. No one's invited in that's not a founder and has been selected in by their peers. We don't take any fees. We don't take any equity. And essentially, it would be as if you and I had one thing so deeply entrenched in who we are that was similar, that was either a life experience or was a dream of ours. Like, let's just say we're both trying to become world-class athletes or Olympians. You and I will always have that connection, and we will understand the struggle, the optimism, the hopes, the dreams, the pain, in a way that no one else will. It's not dissimilar to anything else in life. I'm not trying to be like, entrepreneurship or foundership is, the cat's meow and it's kind of hot right now in society, whatever. The truth is that when you're in it and you feel like you have no other option with your life than to do this, that's what we support each other in.
Beautiful. And so that's kind of how you met Mark. And then what's it been like viewing and participating in Arkamoto from going public until today?
Yeah. So, when I first met Mark, the team is at this point 6-7 people. And it's a startup, and Mark has funded it for the vast majority of its duration as a company, as has his family and some friends. And you look at the prototypes back then; these are $150,000, $250,000 prototypes. They're one-offs. They're very valuable, right, to the team, because you're trying to exemplify what this future form factor product could be, and the problems it would solve, and the solutions it would provide. So, watching someone like Mark and the company Arkamoto go from that to where it's at today, which is 270 employees, at this point has reached a market cap of $1.3 billion and is manufacturing as of today 4 vehicles a day, soon to be 6. Many might say, well, that's kind of that's an interesting story, but haven't we heard this before? I don't think so, because when it really boils down to it, I think one of the things that people don't understand about Mark at the level they probably should is, and I mean this wholeheartedly, I've never met anybody in my life that, with all of sort of their quirks and idiosyncrasies, is more committed to a global life's purpose. Without getting too personal, I've seen Mark from afar before I even knew him, because he's a notable family in Oregon. And since I've gotten to know him, I've seen a lot of loss. And I think the burden that comes with that is also a gift. It's the notion that your life is finite. You're here for a very specific purpose. You have been put through what you've been put through, so that you can have a level of resolve and empathy and understanding that others don't. And that, to me, was what always stood out differently about him and this company. It's one thing to say I don't have a backup plan. It's one thing to say that I don't have any alternatives, and I'm all in. It's another thing when you hang around him and realize what all in means.
Yeah.
It's nonstop every day, all day. I think until the day he leaves this earth, period. And so that, I think, burden he carries, but also what it means from an energetic resolve perspective is super powerful.
Good leadership.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons that so many people have an affinity towards the company, is because they see that. When everyone talks about humans in their lives or situations in their lives, they always try to compare it. And I think comparison is one of the biggest issues in the world today. But one thing they're comparing it to is what they've seen as the norm. And when you meet someone like Mark, when you see a company like this, you're like, they're trying to do everything differently. Like, why would you go from 4 wheels to 3 versus 2? Like, all these form factors are proven. What's the point? But if it's a big enough idea, and if you feel like there's really, this is what your purpose is to complete in life, I think you can change the world, and that's what I think everybody's pushing to do.
That's beautiful. And so what keeps you energized and motivated with the Arkamoto vision? Like the impact that it'll have on the future, that you're saying, I'm happy to have been a part of that difference.
Yeah, I think in the end, many of us feel an obligation to do what we can for the earth, especially as more and more studies come out, as you witness it, even in your own short life, what's happening around you, to the environment and to the world at large. I think that's a driver, but I think more importantly, it's just the people. Having spent so much time with the team and with the company, and being on the road with the product set for so long, it's pretty amazing. I've said this to Mark before, and I've said this to the executive team before. I've never been a part of a company where the product was such a blast. A product that immediately brought a smile to someone's face, brought joy into their lives. And I had an opportunity about 5 years ago to get the only, at the time, Generation 8 prototype, the first one with the motorcycle controls, and took it up to North Portland. And we were shooting a little video there around the company and the opportunity coming up, which was the IPO at that time. Well, we lived in a pretty socioeconomically, it was a difficult neighborhood in that regards, and we had the FUV there. Right, all of a sudden, all the neighbors, all of our friends came over and checked this thing out, and we just started doing test drives. And people were smiling and laughing and talking about, oh my gosh, I would love to own one of these things. What do they cost? Oh my God, this makes so much sense. And I distinctly remember we ended up seeing this friend's family, and the kids were like, and my sons had gone through and done some rides, and this kid said, hey, can we get a test drive? I'm like, if your parents say it's cool, you can get a test drive. So they test drove it. They came back, and the kid got it and goes, that was the best day of my life. And I was like, come on. But I was like, maybe that makes sense. If this thing's sort of like a roller coaster ride on the road, and you had this experience with your parents, and like you had this level of fun, those things for me, the team, the family, the drive to try and do something different, and then ultimately people's experience on it, it's awesome. How can you not be excited about a product that's not only improving the environment, that is improving the financial economics of your family, but that's a freaking blast, and that gives you all these benefits? Like, I own one for a reason. It's friggin' awesome.
Yeah.
I
love it. You say on the road, do you mean just that trip to Portland, or have you been out on the road? Like Kenzie and I were both part of Rhoda, the first trip. Have you gone out on the road with Arkamoto before, or
yes.
What was that like?
Yeah, no, I mainly yes. I've probably been on, I don't know, 25, 30 road trips with Arkamoto over the last many years, and many are in the realms of fundraising and presenting to various partners and companies. But yeah, I mean, every time you're out, it's the same thing, right? I mean, you're just trying to engage and activate the audience, which is so easy to do. I mean, you've been in situations where you pull up next to a Ferrari, you pull up next to a Bentley, and people are focused on the FUV, the Arkamoto, and for good cause. It looks different. It's freaking fun. You're out in the world, and when you tell them it's electric, it just crushes.
Love it. That's got to be a joy, man. And then, so are you looking forward to kind of staying in this field? I mean, in the future, Arkamoto's like a company stops needing to bring in, like pitch itself to people. Like, would you transition to a different role, or kind of what would you love to do at Arkamoto?
I think I just want to support whatever the company needs that I might have some knowledge or capacity or expertise in. So as time goes on, I think the same rules always apply. When it comes to building relationships, I think it's number one in business. When it comes to raising capital and raising funds, I think it's, again, all about the relationships. And when you have the capital and you're building a business or a product or service or all three, I guess numbers 2 and 3 are inherent with number 1. It's all about relationships. So I think I will always work to be involved when there's a need that has to do with any one of those 3, which would mean forever. But I mean, let's be honest. I personally plan on buying more FUVs. I plan on opening up a rental center myself. I plan on working with a company. None of these are monetarily driven. I think many people know this. If they just look at the 10 Qs of the company or look deeper in the financials, no one makes really great money at Arkamoto, and that's by choice, and also by the structure and the culture of the company. And the notion is let's do something big and different. Now, of course, there's massive conglomerates in the space, from Tesla to Rivian to NIO to, of course, the big 3 also coming to electrics. Don't get me wrong. We're not taking them on. This is like a snowboard amongst 40 years of skiing history. When they came out, Jake Burton and some of his colleagues came out with the first snowboards, it was sort of like, what is this surfboard on the snow? And it has now matched that industry and has completely opened up and combined a culture of snow enthusiasts. And in the end, I think that's what we're really trying to pull off.
I'm already sold and you're selling me more. Is this kind of what the conversation with potential investors would look like? You just kind of explain the niche that we fit in the world?
I can tell you exactly how a conversation with an investor goes.
I'm so curious. What?
Mark drops down his laptop and says, have you seen our most recent video? And hits play. I try to pull back a little bit and say, how are you doing? You've been since the last time you saw us. What's going on? But I think one of the things that we always do when we're talking about the product is, and we just actually did this, we just went to the Roth conference, which is the biggest microcap private publicly traded, company conference in the world. And we just went, Mark and I, and a couple other team members. And what we did this time is they set you up in these almost like speed dating. And so you'll meet with an investor or private equity firm or a hedge fund, and you'll get 30 to 45 minutes with them. And the whole idea is you sit down, they read your prospectus, they decide whether or not they want to put some resources, i.e. capital, into you. This time was the first time ever that we just walked down to the table every single time and said, come on upstairs, right out front, in front of this insanely gorgeous hotel. We had a series of vehicles. We had a Deliverator, an FUV, an MLM, etc. And we would bring them out and they'd do a test drive or a test ride. And then we would just sit and talk to them, provide them a beverage, let them hang out. The point is they said over and over and over again, not only thank you for getting me out of that seat and out of those speed dates, but thanks for actually engaging with me and showing me something different. And I'm not just looking at a series of spreadsheets on a new mining deal or fracking deal or, software application that's slightly better. Like, it's unique. It's freaking unique. Like, 3-wheeled vehicles as a form of transportation that merges the 4 and the 2. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, you're getting people to shift from something they did. It's like moving from an oven to a microwave. I'm not saying the FUV is like a microwave, separate from separate from
Smaller and faster.
smaller and faster, but it has become ubiquitous,
Yeah.
and that's what the company's trying to do.
How did your job transition from private company to a public? If you were there at the a little bit before, and then obviously since then, your job must have changed kind of dramatically, and maybe not.
I don't know if it changed dramatically. It went from Mark and myself and Fiddy and Doug and anyone on the team when it was, at one point it was 12 of us and then went to 17, but going out and presenting to investors. But imagine sitting down with investors and it's a dinner, you've got a PowerPoint, maybe you have the vehicle outside, maybe you don't. You're trying to convince them to start a vehicle company. Well, one of the sort of adages in this space was it takes $100 million to start an apparel or food or footwear product that's going to be successful. It took over $1 billion. This was an adage, like average, to build a vehicle company. So when you're sitting down and the company's, raised a couple million from Mark and his friends and family, and you get a couple more investors that come in for hundreds of thousands of dollars, like people are like, okay, well, you're $98 million away from a shoe company and you're $998 million from a vehicle company. It's really hard to convince people.
So it had to go public in a way.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about what Bill and Thomas brought to the table was the regulation, a fundraising opportunity. Now there's a series of them, Reg A, Reg A Plus, Reg CF. These were bills passed under the Obama administration, and Bill Humbrecht actually worked on those bills under the Jobs Act, JOBS Act. And the idea was, and Bill's told this story before, he's come up and done full company retreats with Arkamoto before, but Bill had stated when he took Adobe public, they went public and raised about a little over $6 million. And we're a very small company at the time. Back then, you could go public. The whole idea was our customers or the general public, we would like multiple shareholders to own us. We would like the community at large, consumer market, if you will, to understand us and own a piece of what we're doing and help us grow. Mm-hmm. Well, that's changed. So it got to a point to where for a company to go public, generally you want to do $100 million in 12 months forward-looking revenue. The next year you're going to do $100 million in revenue. Then you're going to get one of the big banks. Then they're going to go out there and do a roadshow with you, and they're going to help you raise whatever, $30 to $450 million. Well, Arkamoto at the time wasn't in a position to get real support from venture capital. They weren't in a position to get support from family offices or private equity firms. So Bill's like, listen, here's the deal. We can do this Reg A, and we can go public, and as long as we meet these particular criteria of NASDAQ and the Securities and Exchange Commission, we can uplist, and we did. On NASDAQ, Arkamoto was the 5th company in the world to uplist on NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange by doing a Regulation A, and has been one of the best performers. Don't get me wrong. I know the stock fluctuates and isn't in always the greatest spot, but it was one of the ones that actually worked really, really well. And I think that's a testament to what can be done. If consumers love your product, if consumers are the drivers of your brand, if consumers are the reason that you have a toehold in the market, let them own a piece of your company.
Yeah, and that's sort of a given that does happen with Arkamoto. And so does your job switch from, kind of convincing individual people to kind of talking to the mass public, or are you not really involved in that process of like enlightening, every single American that our company exists and you can invest in it? Do you still focus on one-on-ones or one on a group?
Yeah, always. I think one-on-one is by far the most powerful way to communicate. One-on-many, I think, is also very powerful if you've got the opportunity to really have an engaged or collaborative group of individuals with you. But I was actually talking to an entrepreneur today. I was in Portland this morning, and she was telling me that she was sitting in this meeting, and this guy was talking about you got to make 100 calls every day, and hopefully one of them actually lands and he makes progress on. And I was like, I don't believe that at all. She's like, why? And she goes, do you believe more in sort of the idea that if the right person is sitting in front of you and you're both aligned and you both have sort of been brought there by the universe, right, or the greater cause, do you think that matters? I'm like, I would rather have one conversation a day with the one person I'm supposed to meet with, not structured by me, like it happens, than those 100 calls. And I think that's exactly what it's like with Arkamoto today. Still, I mean, you see this all the time with the executive team. You see this in our meetings. We go to these conferences. We talk to various potential partners, and it really just boils down to one thing. Does this make sense for both of us? Are we aligned in what we're doing? And if we are, then let's just go.
Yeah.
And let's go together, and we'll be stronger for it. So, no, I believe you can build awareness to the masses. I believe you can bring a certain level of education to the masses. But when someone's passionate about something, they can get involved in a way that's just game changing.
Yeah, and so we're nearing the end. So if you want to kind of touch on any final topics, kind of get them ready. But I guess kind of the question I've been flowing around is, maybe that question used to be, hey, would you like to invest for convertible notes or whatever a private company would be? And now that you're public, do you say, hey, buy some shares? Or what does that one? I think that's the question I've kind of been getting to is, what does it look like today when you have that one-on-one conversation?
Yeah, because the company's publicly traded, back before we would raise capital amongst private investors, right? You have these rules and laws and regulations around solicitation of a security. Even when you're raising money for a small privately held company, you're selling often a security. With that being stated, there are rules, and that's what part of the Jobs Act and part of the Reg A was working to democratize. So why was it that almost every single time a company went public or got really, really large, that there were these investors that got in an early stage when none of the rest of us could? Is it because of their network? Did they have the inside track? Did they know the founders? What's the deal? Well, the truth of it is that it mainly has to do with a term they called accreditation. And so accreditation is a term that defines how much money you and your spouse have made in the last 2 calendar years, or your total net worth separate from your home and a couple of other assets that are appreciating. So that separated over 95% of Americans from ever having a chance really to invest. Some studies show it's 97% of Americans. So the whole point of a Regulation A or a Reg CF, which stands for Regulation Crowdfunding, you've seen these things like Start Engine and platforms like it, is that they allow anyone to invest. And when you go public, anyone can invest. You and I can invest. Kenzie and I can invest. Any of us can invest on Robinhood or a like app through Fidelity, whatever, with $20 into any company, including Apple, Tesla, Google, Arkamoto. That wasn't the case for a number of years until it was with publicly traded companies, but until they started doing these Reg A's and these Reg CFs, there was not that option for you to get involved in a company in an earlier stage. Just to give you a sense, when Tesla went public at around $70, and then it reached a peak of almost $1,400. It's 20 times your money. What if you had gotten in when it was $20 or $5 or $1? Well, that's how the wealthy get wealthier, and that is one of the predominant ways that the disparity of wealth keeps growing in this country. So anything that democratizes it, I think is freaking awesome. That's why I'm actually really stoked about this company. Is it's democratizing the whole misnomer of what sort of transportation impact on climate change or climate is. 2, it allows you to buy an electric vehicle at an affordable cost or just rent it. 3, it allows you to build a community. 4, it allows you to actually participate in building a brand, right? It's one thing to go out and buy a major vehicle, EV, and be like, yeah, I've got this. Great. This is totally different. This to me is, it's not as lame as, I'm not even going to say what I was going to say. The point is it has a freaking huge opportunity to be, I think, the snowboard of the road.
Love it. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course.
Next time you're in Gene, you have to come back on.
Thanks
It was
for
a joy
having me.
getting to, talk to someone who was there when we became public, kind of hear all the insight you had. Any final thoughts? But otherwise, thank you very much for coming on.
Go Fov.